We call partnership specialists, people that work with some of our most difficult to count communities. And we hire people with the language skills and the background and knowledge of these communities to work and provide some outreach to community organizations and the local community leaders in those community groups to have them spread the census message. The census message, of course, was more effective coming from somebody within the community than it was just from some other big government organization. And we found that was very effective in breaking down and targeting some of those really difficult communities. We also, as you may have seen, complemented that with a massive sort of multifaceted advertising campaign, media, television, newspapers, billboards, whatever was appropriate for those areas. We tried to reach everyone else with this advertising campaign. We spread the message of the importance of the census, why it was important for people in some of these difficult communities to answer the census. We also spread the message of the safety and making sure that people were assured that providing answers and filling out that census was safe, that there would be no adverse actions if they were to return those answers. The advertising campaign, for the first time, was expanded to 28 languages to reach every different area of the population that we needed to do. And those were, of course, targeted geographically to the areas that we needed to target those to reach those communities. Back up again on the census or on the address list, those efforts really began back in 2008. And in 2008 is when we really provided the local governments and state governments, including Rhode Island, the opportunity to look at, review our address list and provide comments, because who better to provide or know where housing units are, where people could live, but people in those communities and the people from those governments. So we provided this, we provided the opportunity to the local updated census addresses program to look at the census address list that would be used ultimately to deliver those questionnaires, and then provide updates. You know, they could change things, move addresses if we do not have them in the right location. This was actually the first opportunity for local governments and state governments to have a direct impact on the census. And we had some pretty good participation in Rhode Island on that program. This operation was followed up by our address canvassing operation, and that was done with a large field staff of enumerators and listers who drove up and down every single street in Rhode Island, visited every household in Rhode Island, and confirmed and corrected the address list, including those addresses that we got from local and state governments. The AdCan operation, the address canvassing operation, also identified what we call other living quarters. And these are places where people could live, or maybe other situations that did not fit a typical household. And so we classified those as other living quarters. Those facilities were later followed up in the fall of 2009 through our group quarter validation program. We went out to see what were these places. Should they have been listed as housing units? Should they be listed as a group quarter? A group quarter is your typical college dormitory, maybe a prison, maybe a nursing home, places where people tend to live in a group setting. Okay, so we confirm those as either group quarters, or we return those back to the housing unit sort of universe, or we would classify those appropriately during that phase. To build on the group quarter operation, we followed up on the group quarter validation operation with group quarters advanced visit phase. And this is actually a very unique but effective program where we, shortly before we enumerated group quarters in the spring of 2010, we conducted an advanced visit operation. We went out and reconfirmed the existence of that group quarter. We also scheduled and made arrangements to follow up for the actual enumeration. We wanted to find out who we needed to talk with, what time we needed to come back, and what was the best opportunity to come back and enumerate the people within those group quarters, to make sure that we counted everyone, college dorms, in the prisons, in the nursing homes, or what have you. Of course, in the spring of 2010 is when we began our massive mail-out. And that's where that's the method where the bulk of the questionnaires were delivered. We would mail those addresses to every housing which we captured in the local updated census addresses program or our address canvassing operation, and we delivered those questionnaires to every single household. And then we waited for those questionnaires to be mailed back. And just to let you know, in Rhode Island, we matched the mail participation rate of 2000, which was 73%. So we had a very good mail sort of participation rate. Those people that simply filled out the questionnaire and returned that back to the Census Bureau. So that's avoiding any other follow-up operations to those households, to enumerate those households. 2010 was the first time that we sent to targeted locations bilingual questionnaires, English-Spanish bilingual questionnaires, which was the first and unique opportunity for people who maybe did not speak English to answer those questionnaires. We also provided instructions to request a form in four additional languages, and those are Russian, Chinese, Korean, and Vietnamese. Okay, and then on top of that, we had a series of language assistance centers in all of the communities that required them to set up basically tables with staff to assist people to fill out questionnaires with language assistance sort of guides, so they could take that and fill out the questionnaires that they brought back to those tables. And those were very effective in reaching and getting people to fill out the census in the language that they of course were most comfortable in. May of 2010, that began the largest, most complicated effort or program of the census, and that was our non-response follow-up. So every household that did not return a questionnaire, we had to follow up in person. And we wanted to follow up and find out, we wanted to enumerate that household or find out what the status of that particular household was. We visited every home multiple times. In fact, up to 6 times we would visit a home if we couldn't get through. And we tracked the time that the enumerators went back to homes. So they went back at different times, different days, different weeks. So we weren't just catching people if they were away on vacation, they just weren't present at that particular moment. The operation also included a very detailed quality check operation, separate field staff to go out and do a sample of the data that was being collected by the field staff that were knocking on doors and filling out those questionnaires with people that did not return their questionnaire. So, as you can see, we have gone through a tremendous amount of effort to list addresses and to deliver questionnaires and to enumerate the population. And I know there may be, heard there's some questions about potential vacants, and some of those vacants were identified in the non-response follow-up operation. Of course, if somebody's not living in a home, they're not going to return the questionnaire. So we did track the rate of vacancies. So there were no sort of field collection area. There were no one enumerator that were sort of out of bounds in a particular area. So we statistically looked at the entire region and said, yeah, it makes sense for that particular area. But to follow up on the identification of vacancies, following the non-response follow-up operation, we had what we call the vacant delete check. That was a separate operation that happened in the summer of 2010. And we went back out in a completely separate operation to verify that each unit that was identified in the non-response follow-up as vacant was actually vacant. So that was something that sort of an additional, if you want to call it, quality check of the vacant. So reconfirming the fact that those units